November 8th, 1942, Kasserine Pass, Tunisia. A thin line of German veterans watched through binoculars as American troops advanced across the desert valley below. Oberst Hans-Jürgen von Arnim, commanding elements of the 5th Panzer Army, lowered his field glasses and turned to his officers with an expression that mixed contempt with confidence. "The Americans are coming with their new rifle," he said. "They fire bullets like they're millionaires wasting gold. One well-aimed shot from a Mauser is worth 10 from their wasteful machine." His officers nodded in agreement. The German military philosophy, refined through decades of Prussian doctrine, emphasized precision marksmanship, fire discipline, and the tactical principle that ammunition was a precious resource to be conserved. The German soldier, armed with a Karabiner 98K, was trained to make every shot count. 5 rounds in the magazine, each one carefully aimed, each one meant to find its target. This was the way of the professional soldier. The Americans, with their new semi-automatic rifle that spewed 8 rounds as fast as a man could pull the trigger, seemed to embody everything the Germans found wasteful about American culture: excess, overindulgence, a lack of discipline. Within 18 months, those same German officers would be writing desperate reports to Berlin, pleading for weapons that could match the devastating firepower of the M1 Garand. The rifle they had mocked as wasteful had become the sound of their nightmares. The metallic ping of an ejected clip, once dismissed as a tactical liability, became the last sound thousands of German soldiers would ever hear. This is the story of how American industrial might and tactical innovation transformed a weapon German officers thought was wastefully extravagant into the implement that broke the back of the Wehrmacht. The M1 Garand didn't just outshoot German rifles, it buried them under an avalanche of precisely delivered firepower that German tactical doctrine had no answer for. The journey to this transformation began decades earlier, in the aftermath of World War I. The trenches of the Western Front had revealed the limitations of bolt-action rifles in modern warfare. While excellent for long-range marksmanship, the manual cycling of a bolt between shots left soldiers vulnerable in the close-quarters brutality of trench fighting. The United States Army, studying the lessons of the Great War, recognized that future conflicts would demand higher volumes of fire from individual infantrymen. In 1919, a French-Canadian immigrant named John Cantius Garand went to work at Springfield Armory in Massachusetts. Born in 1888 near Montreal, Garand had moved to the United States as a boy and developed an extraordinary talent for firearms design. His task was daunting: create a semi-automatic rifle that could fire as quickly as a soldier could pull the trigger, without sacrificing the accuracy and reliability that American troops needed. The development process was exhausting. Garand spent 16 years perfecting his design, competing against other submissions from renowned firearms designers. His early prototypes faced skepticism from military traditionalists who believed bolt-action rifles were sufficient. Many officers argued that semi-automatic fire would encourage soldiers to waste ammunition, firing wildly instead of taking careful aim. This philosophical objection would later be echoed by German officers when they first encountered the M1 in combat. Garand's breakthrough came with his gas-operated system. When a round was fired, expanding gases were channeled from a port near the muzzle back through a tube beneath the barrel. These gases drove a piston that cycled the action, ejecting the spent cartridge and chambering a fresh round. All the soldier had to do was pull the trigger again. The rifle chambered the powerful .30-06 Springfield cartridge, the same round used in the bolt-action M1 1903 Springfield. This decision was partly logistical. The Army had enormous stockpiles of .30-06 ammunition left over from World War I. Retooling factories for a new cartridge would be prohibitively expensive, but the choice had profound tactical implications. The M1 Garand would deliver the same powerful long-range round as a bolt-action rifle, but with dramatically higher rates of fire. On August 3, 1933, the United States Army officially adopted Garand's design as the M1 rifle. It would be the first semi-automatic rifle to become standard issue for any nation's military. Production began slowly. Springfield Armory delivered its first M1 Garands in September 1937, producing just 10 rifles per day. By 1939, as war erupted in Europe, production had increased to 100 rifles daily. By January 1941, 600 M1 Garands rolled off the production line every single day. The rifle featured an innovative on-block clip system. 8 rounds were loaded into a metal clip that was inserted into the rifle from the top, pushing down on the follower. When the last round was fired, the clip was automatically ejected with a distinctive metallic ping. This sound would become legendary, with myths spreading that German soldiers listened for the ping to know when an American rifleman was empty. Post-war interviews with German veterans revealed this was largely false. In the chaos of combat, with explosions, machine gun fire and shouted orders, the ping was nearly impossible to hear. American troops initially resisted the new rifle. Old soldiers, comfortable with the bolt-action Springfield, complained that the M1 was too heavy at 9.5 pounds. They worried it would jam in combat. They feared its complexity would make field maintenance difficult. Most significantly, they echoed the concern that would later be expressed by German officers. Semi-automatic fire would encourage soldiers to waste ammunition. Army sergeants worried that the ease of firing would cause their men to spray bullets wildly instead of aiming carefully. The bonus pay for expert marksmen might be threatened if soldiers couldn't maintain their shooting standards with the new rifle. These concerns proved groundless. The M1 Garand was remarkably reliable. Its gas-operated system functioned in desert sand, jungle humidity, and Arctic cold. While it required cleaning like any weapon, soldiers found it no more difficult to maintain than a bolt-action rifle. And far from encouraging poor marksmanship, the M1's semi-automatic action actually improved shooting. A soldier could fire 8 rounds without breaking his sight picture or firing position. The rhythm of combat changed. Pull the trigger, feel the recoil, reacquire the target, fire again. No need to work a bolt, no need to move the rifle from the shoulder. The shooter remained in position, maintaining accuracy while delivering devastating volumes of fire. As production ramped up and training intensified, American soldiers began to appreciate what they had been given. The M1 Garand could fire 40 to 50 accurate shots per minute in the hands of a trained rifleman. A bolt-action rifle, even in the hands of an expert, might achieve 15 to 20 shots per minute. The M1 tripled the firepower of the American infantryman. When the United States entered World War II in December 1941, the Army was almost entirely equipped with M1 Garands. The Marine Corps still used M1-3 Springfields in early operations, but by mid-1943, Marines too carried the Garand. The rifle would see its first significant combat testing in the Pacific. American troops landing on Guadalcanal in August 1942 brought their M1 Garands into the jungle. Japanese forces, armed with bolt-action Arisaka rifles, were stunned by the volume of fire American infantrymen could deliver. Japanese soldiers reported believing they faced machine gun positions, not individual riflemen. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. But it was in North Africa, fighting against German and Italian forces, that the M1 Garand would truly prove its revolutionary nature. And it was there that German officers would first articulate their disdain for the American rifle and its wasteful expenditure of ammunition. Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of French North Africa, began in November 1942. American forces landed in Morocco and Algeria, pushing eastward to link up with British troops advancing from Egypt. German forces in Tunisia, reinforced by elements of the Afrika Korps, prepared to defend against the inexperienced Americans. German officers, veterans of campaigns in Poland, France and Russia, viewed the approaching Americans with professional contempt. The United States Army had not fought a major war since 1918. Most American soldiers were green recruits with minimal combat experience. The Germans expected to deliver the Americans a harsh lesson in the realities of modern warfare. Initial engagements seemed to confirm German assumptions. At the Battle of Kasserine Pass in February 1943, German forces under General Hans-Jürgen von Arnim inflicted a tactical defeat on American troops, pushing them back through the mountain passes. German officers wrote reports emphasizing American inexperience and poor tactical coordination. But buried in those reports were troubling observations. American infantry squads, when they stood and fought, delivered extraordinary volumes of rifle fire. German veterans, accustomed to facing Soviet troops with bolt-action Mosin Nagants and British soldiers with bolt-action Lee Enfields, found themselves suppressed by curtains of 30-06 rounds. The Americans weren't better shots than the Germans. Their tactics were often clumsy. But they were firing 3 or 4 times as many bullets. Oberst von Arnim, in his after-action report, noted with disapproval. The American soldier fires his rifle as if ammunition is unlimited. He shows no fire discipline, He wastes bullets on targets he has not properly identified. This wasteful expenditure of ammunition cannot be sustained. Eventually their supply lines will falter, and they will learn that war requires discipline and precision, not profligate shooting. It was the classic German military perspective. Ammunition was a resource to be carefully managed. The well-trained soldier did not fire unless he had a clear target and a reasonable expectation of a hit. Rapid semi-automatic fire seemed to embody a lack of military professionalism. What German officers failed to grasp in early 1943 was that American industrial capacity made their concept of ammunition scarcity irrelevant. While German logistics struggled to supply frontline troops, American factories were producing billions of rounds of .30-06 ammunition. The United States was not wasteful. It was simply operating on a scale the Germans couldn't comprehend. By mid-1943, as American forces gained combat experience and pushed German troops back across North Africa, the tone of German reports began to shift. Complaints about wasteful American shooting gave way to concerns about the tactical implications of that firepower. A German company commander wrote in June 1943, "We attacked an American position today held by perhaps 20 men. Our assault was conducted properly with good fire and movement, but the Americans did not break as expected. Their rifle fire was continuous and heavy. We could not advance. We lost 11 men attempting to close with them. The Americans lost perhaps 3. Their semi-automatic rifles allow them to maintain suppressive fire that pins down our attacks. This is a significant tactical problem. The problem was becoming clear. German infantry tactics relied on maneuver and close assault. Small units would advance using terrain for cover, supported by machine gun fire. Bolt-action rifles provided adequate fire support for these movements. The relatively slow rate of fire from enemy bolt-action rifles allowed German troops to advance during the pauses when enemy soldiers were cycling their bolts. Against M1 Garands, those pauses didn't exist. American riflemen fired continuously, 8 rounds without reloading. When one soldier's clip ran empty with its distinctive ping, other soldiers were still firing. The suppressive effect was devastating. German troops trying to advance found themselves unable to move. Every time a soldier exposed himself to advance, multiple American rifles engaged him. The concentrated firepower turned German assault tactics into suicide missions. In July 1943, American and British forces invaded Sicily. The fighting was brutal, with German defenders contesting every ridge and town. But the invasion succeeded, and by September, Allied forces had crossed to mainland Italy. Throughout these campaigns, German commanders filed reports noting the same frustrations. American rifle fire was overwhelming their infantry tactics. The Sicily campaign produced another shift in German perspective. Complaints about wastefulness disappeared. German officers stopped mocking the M1 Garand. Instead, they began requesting semi-automatic rifles for their own troops. A Wehrmacht divisional commander wrote in August 1943, "The enemy's semi-automatic rifle provides a decisive advantage in infantry combat. Our troops, armed with bolt-action carabine and 98K rifles, cannot match the volume of fire American infantry delivers. We require similar weapons if we are to compete effectively. This is not a matter of soldier quality or tactical skill. It is a matter of firepower. We are bringing bolt-action rifles to a semi-automatic fight." The request went nowhere. Germany had experimented with semi-automatic rifles since the 1930s, but early designs were complex and unreliable. The Gewehr 41, introduced in limited numbers in 1941, suffered from chronic malfunctions. An improved design, the Gewehr 43, entered production in October 1943, but never in sufficient quantities to replace the Karabiner 98K. Most German infantry would fight the entire war with bolt-action rifles. The reasons were partly technological. Semi-automatic rifles were more complex and expensive to manufacture than bolt-action designs. Germany's industrial capacity, stretched thin by the demands of producing tanks, aircraft and artillery, couldn't retool quickly enough to mass-produce a new rifle. But the reasons were also doctrinal. German infantry tactics were built around the machine gun. A German squad's firepower came from its MG-34 or MG-42 machine gun. Riflemen were seen primarily as support for the machine gunner, providing covering fire and carrying ammunition. This doctrine worked well when all infantry carried bolt-action rifles. Against American squads where every rifleman was a semi-automatic shooter, the German doctrine broke down. By early 1944, as the Allies prepared for the invasion of France, The firepower differential between American and German infantry had become stark. An American infantry squad consisted of 12 men. 10 of them carried M1 Garands. 1 carried a Browning automatic rifle, a magazine-fed light machine gun. 1 carried an M1 carbine. That squad could deliver devastating volumes of accurate rifle fire, with the bar providing additional support. A German infantry squad of the same size typically had 8 or 9 men with bolt-action carabine 98K rifles, 1 or 2 with MP40 submachine guns, short-range weapons with limited effectiveness beyond 50 meters, and 1 MG42 machine gun. On paper, the MG42's rate of fire gave the German squad superior firepower. In practice, American squads often won firefights through the cumulative effect of multiple M1 Garands firing simultaneously. June 6, 1944, the invasion of Normandy. American troops of the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions waded ashore on Omaha Beach under withering fire from German positions on the heights above. The initial assault was a bloodbath. German machine guns swept the beach. Mortar fire rained down on the landing craft. American soldiers huddled behind beach obstacles, pinned down and taking casualties. But as small groups of men began to move, working their way up draws and gullies toward the German positions, the M1 Garand proved its worth in close combat. Staff Sergeant Frank Peregrine of the 116th Infantry Regiment led a small squad in a flanking attack on a German strongpoint. His after-action report, written days later, captured the intensity. We moved up the gully using smoke for cover. When we came around the corner, there were maybe 30 Germans in the pillbox and trench line. We just started shooting, 8 guys with Garands. We poured fire into that position. The Germans couldn't get organised to return fire. Every time one of them tried to bring a weapon to bear, someone shot him. We killed or wounded maybe 15 of them in the first minute. The rest surrendered. Those Garands saved our lives. Across the Normandy beachhead, similar scenes played out. American infantry, once they got off the beaches and into close combat, found their M1 Garands gave them a decisive advantage in firefights. The rifle's semi-automatic action and 8-round capacity allowed small groups to deliver fire that suppressed and overwhelmed German positions. German defenders noted the impact. A report from the 302nd Infantry Division, which defended Omaha Beach, stated, "The enemy infantry is equipped with a semi-automatic rifle that fires as rapidly as our submachine guns but with greater range and accuracy. Their soldiers maintain continuous fire. Our men cannot maneuver under such conditions. The enemy shoots constantly. We shoot, then work our bolts, and in that moment they shoot again. It is like fighting men who never need to reload." By late June, as American forces pushed inland from the beaches, German commanders in Normandy were writing increasingly desperate assessments of their infantry's vulnerability to American rifle fire. The tone had completely shifted from the contemptuous dismissals of 1942. One report from July 1944 captured the transformation. The American M1 rifle represents a significant tactical advantage. Our soldiers report that American infantry squads deliver rifle fire equivalent to a light machine gun position. This allows them to pin our troops while maneuvering against our flanks. Our bolt-action rifles cannot provide sufficient suppressive fire to counter their tactics. The weapon we mocked 2 years ago as wasteful has proved to be a devastating combat instrument. The Americans were not wasting ammunition. They were applying it with brutal effectiveness. The rifle that seemed to embody wasteful excess was actually a calculated application of industrial superiority. America could produce the ammunition. American factories could manufacture the complex semi-automatic rifles. American logistics could deliver both to the front lines in unlimited quantities. And American infantrymen, properly trained and equipped, could bring firepower to bear that German soldiers simply couldn't match. The summer of 1944 saw American forces break out of Normandy and race across France. German armies, battered by superior Allied firepower and air supremacy, retreated toward the German border. In firefights large and small, the M1 Garand continued to prove its worth. A German lieutenant captured in September 1944 near the Siegfried Line was interrogated by American intelligence officers. The transcript of that interrogation reveals the complete reversal of German attitudes toward the M1 Garand. Question: You fought against American infantry for several months. What were your observations about their weapons and tactics? Answer: Your rifle is superior to ours in every way that matters in combat. Yes, Our Carabiner 98K is accurate. Yes, it is reliable, but it fires one shot, then we must work the bolt. In that time, an American soldier fires 2 or 3 more rounds. A squad of your men fires like a machine gun. We could not advance against such fire. Question: did you consider American soldiers to be wasteful with ammunition? Answer: wasteful? No. That is what our officers told us at first. They said the Americans fire too much, that they lack discipline, but we learned this was foolish thinking. The Americans fire a great deal because they can, because their factories make enough ammunition, because their rifles allow it, and because it works. They suppress us with rifle fire, then maneuver against our positions. We could not do the same to them. Our single shots were not enough. Question: if you could have chosen your weapon, would you have taken an M1 Garand? Answer: of course, any soldier would. We captured some M1 rifles and the men who got them kept them. They were treasured. Better than our own rifles in every practical way. The one disadvantage was that captured ammunition was not always available, but when we had ammunition, those M1 rifles were vastly preferred. The prisoner's testimony was corroborated by dozens of similar interrogations. German soldiers, given the choice between their bolt-action Carabiner 98K and a captured M1 Garand, invariably chose the American rifle. The weapon German officers had dismissed as wastefully extravagant was being prized by German soldiers as superior to their own arms. By late 1944, German military publications were analysing the M1 Garand in detail, acknowledging its tactical superiority. One training document distributed to German infantry units in November 1944 included this assessment. The enemy's M1 rifle allows American infantry to maintain suppressive fire that is difficult to counter with bolt-action rifles. German soldiers must use cover and concealment aggressively, as exposure to American rifle fire is extremely dangerous. The American soldier fires rapidly and accurately. Do not assume he will waste his ammunition. He has plenty, and he uses it effectively. The document went on to suggest tactics for countering American rifle fire, most of which involved avoiding direct firefights with American infantry squads. German troops were advised to use machine guns and mortars to suppress American positions, then maneuver quickly to close the distance where MP-40 submachine guns and hand grenades could be employed. But these were desperate tactics, acknowledgements that German infantry had no effective answer to the M1 Garand's firepower at medium range. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 provided one final test of the M1 Garand under the worst possible conditions. German forces launched a massive surprise offensive through the Ardennes forest, attacking in heavy snow and bitter cold. American units, many of them inexperienced or resting after heavy fighting, were caught off guard. Initial German advances were significant, but as American forces recovered and reinforcements arrived, the M1 Garand once again proved its worth. The rifle functioned flawlessly in sub-zero temperatures. While German bolt-action rifles suffered from frozen bolts and stiff actions, the gas-operated M1 kept firing. American soldiers reported that their rifles worked perfectly even after being dragged through snow and mud. One sergeant from the 101st Airborne Division, surrounded at Bastogne, later recalled, "We were cold, we were low on ammunition, we were outnumbered, but our rifles never quit on us. The M1 worked every time. We'd see Germans trying to work frozen bolts on their rifles, and we'd just keep shooting." That rifle saved our lives more times than I can count. German soldiers attacking through the Ardennes faced American infantry who, despite being surprised and often surrounded, delivered withering rifle fire. The M1 Garand's reliability in extreme cold gave American troops a significant advantage. As the German offensive stalled and then collapsed, prisoners taken in January 1945 told interrogators that American rifle fire had been decisive in stopping their attacks. The war in Europe ended in May 1945 with Germany's unconditional surrender. In the Pacific, the M1 Garand continued to prove its worth against Japanese forces until Japan's surrender in August. Over the course of the war, approximately 5.4 million M1 Garands were manufactured by Springfield Armory and Winchester Repeating Arms. The rifle equipped American and Allied forces across every theatre of the war. Its impact on the battlefield was profound and undeniable. General George S. Patton, never one for understatement, called the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. While Patton's hyperbole was characteristic, his assessment was rooted in battlefield reality. The M1 Garand gave American infantry a firepower advantage that German forces never overcame. The transformation in German military opinion about the M1 Garand represents one of the most complete reversals in military history. From contemptuous dismissal as wastefully extravagant in 1942, to desperate requests for equivalent weapons by 1943, to frank acknowledgement of American tactical superiority by 1944, German officers watched their initial assumptions shattered by battlefield reality. The rifle they thought was wasteful was actually a weapon optimized for industrial-age warfare. America's ability to produce ammunition in unlimited quantities wasn't a weakness to be exploited. It was a strength to be leveraged. The M1 Garand allowed American soldiers to bring that industrial capacity to bear at the individual rifleman level. But beyond the statistics and the tactical assessments, the M1 Garand's impact was deeply personal for the soldiers who carried it. American infantrymen trusted the rifle absolutely. They knew it would fire when they pulled the trigger. They knew it would keep firing for 8 rounds without pause. They knew it gave them an edge in combat that could mean the difference between life and death. Ernie Pyle, the legendary war correspondent who covered the infantry campaigns in Europe, wrote about the M1 Garand in one of his dispatches. The American soldier and his Garand rifle are inseparable. He cleans it religiously. He curses its weight on long marches, but in combat he loves it. Because when the shooting starts, that rifle keeps talking. It doesn't leave him working a bolt while the enemy shoots back. It fires as fast as he can pull the trigger, and it's accurate enough to hit what he aims at. The Germans respect the Garand. I've talked to prisoners who say it's the best infantry rifle of the war. Coming from men who carry one of the finest bolt-action rifles ever made, that's quite an admission. After the war, captured German documents revealed the extent to which German military planners had been concerned about American rifle firepower. Internal memoranda from 1943 and 1944 show repeated requests from field commanders for semi-automatic rifles to match the M1 Garand. These requests were consistently denied, not because German leaders didn't recognize the problem, but because German industry couldn't produce such weapons in the quantities needed. One particularly revealing document, a report from the German Ordnance Office dated March 1944, stated, "The American M1 rifle represents a significant advantage in infantry combat. Our Gewehr 43 program cannot produce sufficient numbers to equip all infantry units. The Sturmgewehr 44 program shows promise, but is being opposed by conservative elements in the high command. Unless we can match American firepower at the individual soldier level, our infantry will continue to suffer disproportionate casualties in close combat." The report was prophetic. German infantry did continue to suffer heavy casualties throughout 1944 and 1945, particularly when engaged in close-range firefights with American troops. The technological and industrial advantage represented by the M1 Garand was something Germany could not overcome in the time available. The M1 Garand remained the standard American military rifle through the Korean War, where it again proved its worth in combat. It wasn't until 1957 that the M1 was officially replaced by the M14, a selective fire rifle that was essentially an updated Garand with a detachable 20-round magazine. Even after its replacement, the M1 Garand remained in service with various military and police organizations for decades. Its reliability and effectiveness had been so thoroughly proven that many organizations were reluctant to give up the rifle. Today, the M1 Garand is treasured by collectors and shooting enthusiasts. The Civilian Marksmanship Program, a federally chartered organization, makes surplus M1 Garands available to qualified American citizens. Competitive shooting matches specifically for the M1 Garand draw hundreds of participants. The rifle's distinctive ping when the clip ejects has become an iconic sound, recognized even by people who have never fired the weapon. But for historians and military analysts, the M1 Garand represents something more significant than a collectible firearm or a piece of Americana. It represents the moment when industrial capacity became a decisive factor in individual infantry combat. The rifle that German officers dismissed as wasteful because it fired too many bullets was actually the embodiment of a new kind of warfare. A warfare where the side that could produce more, supply more, and shoot more would ultimately prevail. German military philosophy emphasized precision, discipline, and conservation of resources. These were not bad principles. They had served Germany well for decades. But they were principles developed in an era of resource scarcity, when ammunition had to be carefully rationed and every bullet had to count. The M1 Garand represented a different philosophy. Not precision for its own sake, but precision combined with volume. Not conservation of ammunition, but application of ammunition in quantities sufficient to overwhelm the enemy. Not fire discipline, as an end in itself, but fire discipline in service of tactical effectiveness. American soldiers didn't waste ammunition with their M1 Garands. They used it. They applied it to tactical problems in quantities that solved those problems. A German soldier with a bolt-action rifle might fire 15 carefully aimed shots in a firefight. An American soldier with an M1 Garand might fire 40 shots in the same time. Were the Americans' shots less carefully aimed? Perhaps marginally. But the cumulative effect of 40 shots versus 15 shots was devastating. The German soldier spent a significant portion of his time working a bolt. The American soldier spent that time aiming and firing. The mathematics were brutal and undeniable. The personal testimonies of soldiers who fought with the M1 Garand reveal their deep appreciation for the weapon. One veteran, interviewed decades after the war, recalled, "I carried that rifle through France and Germany. It was heavy on the march, but in a firefight you forgot about the weight. You just fired, and it fired every time. I trusted that rifle with my life, and it never let me down." I saw German soldiers with their bolt actions trying to keep up with our rate of fire. They couldn't do it. We had an advantage, and we knew it. Another veteran remembered the psychological impact of the rifle. When we assaulted a German position, we'd all fire at once. 8 or 10 M1s firing together sounded like a machine gun. The Germans would hunker down and we'd keep firing, keep moving, keep pressing them. They couldn't return fire effectively because we were shooting so much. It wasn't that we were better soldiers. We had a better weapon. The M1 Garand's legacy extends beyond World War II and Korea. Its design influenced subsequent military rifles around the world. The Soviet Union studied captured M1 Garands and incorporated lessons into their own designs. The French, British, and other Allied nations requested M1 Garands under Lend-Lease and came to appreciate the weapon's capabilities. But perhaps the most significant legacy is conceptual. The M1 Garand proved that industrial capacity could be translated into tactical advantage at the level of the individual soldier. It wasn't enough to have superior tanks or aircraft or artillery. The infantryman, the soldier on the ground with a rifle, needed the best possible weapon that industry could produce. And in the case of the M1 Garand, American industry produced a weapon that German officers initially dismissed as wasteful, then feared and finally acknowledged as superior. The rifle that fired too many bullets became the rifle that fired just enough bullets to win firefights, capture objectives, and ultimately contribute to Allied victory in World War II. The men who carried it trusted it absolutely. The men who faced it learned to respect and fear it, and the military that produced it demonstrated that in modern warfare, the capacity to produce and supply superior weapons in unlimited quantities was as important as tactical doctrine or soldier training. The M1 Garand didn't win World War II by itself. No single weapon does. But it gave American infantry a tangible advantage in combat, an advantage that German forces, despite their tactical skill and combat experience, could never overcome. The rifle German officers thought was wastefully extravagant turned out to be exactly what American infantrymen needed: reliable, accurate, powerful, and capable of delivering firepower in quantities that overwhelmed enemy positions. By the time German officers realized their mistake, it was too late. American industry was producing M1 Garands by the millions. American logistics were delivering them to soldiers across multiple theaters of war. American infantry were using them to devastating effect in combat. The transformation was complete. The rifle once mocked as wasteful had become the standard against which all other infantry rifles were measured, and for the men who carried it into battle, the M1 Garand was simply the greatest rifle they could have asked for. It fired when they needed it to fire. It kept firing as long as they kept pulling the trigger, and it brought them home alive. That was all that mattered. The story of the M1 Garand's dominance didn't end with broad strategic assessments. It lived in thousands of small moments where individual American soldiers faced German troops and prevailed because of superior firepower. These encounters, documented in after-action reports and soldier testimonies, reveal the human dimension of technological advantage. Private First Class John Basilone, fighting with the Marines on Guadalcanal in October 1942, held a position against a Japanese banzai charge while his machine guns jammed. He grabbed an M1 Garand from a fallen Marine and used it to hold off attackers until his guns could be cleared. His Medal of Honor citation noted that he killed 38 enemy soldiers that night. While Basillone's heroism was extraordinary, the M1 Garand's reliability under impossible conditions was not. The rifle functioned flawlessly in tropical humidity that rusted other weapons. In Europe, the tactical applications of the M1's firepower became increasingly sophisticated as American soldiers gained combat experience. By late 1944, infantry squads had developed techniques that maximized the rifle's capabilities. One common tactic involved having half the squad fire continuously, while the other half maneuvered. With M1 Garands delivering sustained fire, German defenders couldn't raise their heads to return effective fire. Lieutenant Paul Fussell, who fought with the 103rd Infantry Division in France and Germany, later became a literary scholar and wrote extensively about his war experience. His memoir described the M1 Garand's impact with academic precision. The rifle's semi-automatic action meant that fire superiority could be achieved and maintained by relatively small units. In any encounter engagement, the side that could deliver more rounds on target in the first 30 seconds usually prevailed. The M1 gave us that advantage almost automatically. You didn't need to be a tactical genius. You just needed to shoot and keep shooting while the Germans were working their bolts. The ammunition logistics behind the M1 Garand's effectiveness was staggering. Each rifleman in combat typically carried 80 rounds in 10 8-round clips. Additional ammunition was carried in unit supply. During sustained operations, American infantrymen might fire hundreds of rounds per day. The logistics system that supplied this ammunition represented another triumph of American industrial organization. Lake City Arsenal in Missouri was built specifically to produce small arms ammunition. By 1944, the facility was producing 30 million rounds of 30-06 ammunition every month. Winchester, Remington, and other commercial manufacturers added tens of millions more rounds monthly. The United States produced approximately 11 billion rounds of 30-06 ammunition during World War II. That's 11,000 million rounds, enough to supply M1 Garand shooters almost without limit. The ammunition itself was manufactured to extraordinary standards. Each cartridge had to function flawlessly in the M1's gas-operated system. Variations in powder charge or bullet weight could cause malfunctions. Yet American factories produced billions of rounds that worked reliably in rifles, firing under every conceivable condition. German ordnance officers, examining captured American ammunition, were impressed by the consistency and quality control. This industrial capacity had strategic implications that extended far beyond individual firefights. German forces in the field knew that American soldiers never ran out of ammunition. Attacks that might have succeeded against a force running low on bullets failed because Americans could maintain suppressive fire indefinitely. Defensive positions that might have been overrun held because American riflemen had unlimited ammunition to pour into attacking formations. A German major captured in the Hürtgen forest in November 1944 explained the psychological impact during his interrogation. Your soldiers shoot constantly. They never seem concerned about conserving ammunition. When we attack, they fire the entire time we're approaching. Even when we get close, they keep firing. Our men know that American positions will not go silent because they've run out of bullets. This affects morale. Our soldiers hesitate to attack because they know they'll face continuous fire. The Hürtgen Forest campaign, fought from September through December 1944, was one of the bloodiest battles of the war. Dense forest and terrible weather conditions created a nightmare environment for combat. Trees burst from artillery fire, sending lethal wooden splinters through the air. Visibility was measured in yards. Soldiers fought at point-blank range. In these conditions, the M1 Garand proved superior to bolt-action rifles in the most visceral way possible. When American and German patrols encountered each other in the forest, firefights erupted instantly at ranges of 10 to 20 yards. This side that could fire more bullets in the first few seconds usually won. American troops with M1 Garands had a devastating advantage. Sergeant Mac Morris of the 1st Infantry Division fought through the Hürtgen and later wrote about the experience. You'd be moving through the trees and suddenly there'd be Germans right in front of you. No time to take cover, no time for tactics, just shooting. Whoever got the most lead in the air first was going to survive. The M1 let us fire fast, really fast. I saw German soldiers trying to work their bolt actions while we were already firing our 3rd and 4th rounds. Most of them died before they got a second shot off. It was brutal. It was survival. The fighting in the Hurtgen forest cost both sides terrible casualties, but German losses were consistently higher in infantry versus infantry engagements. American after-action reports attributed this partly to superior supporting arms, but repeatedly noted that rifle fire from M1 Garands gave American infantry a critical advantage in close combat. By early 1945, as Allied forces pushed into Germany itself, the M1 Garand's reputation among German soldiers was universal. Captured German training documents from this period advised soldiers to avoid direct firefights with American infantry whenever possible. One document, issued to a Volksgrenadier division in February 1945, included this remarkable passage. The enemy rifleman with his M1 is equivalent to one of our soldiers with a machine pistol, but with far greater range and accuracy. Do not expect to win firefights against American infantry. Use machine guns and Panzerfausts. Close quickly to grenade range. Do not engage at medium range where their semi-automatic rifles are most effective. The document represented complete capitulation to American firepower superiority. German tactical doctrine, built over decades, had no effective answer to the M1 Garand's combination of rate of fire, range, and accuracy. German soldiers were being advised to avoid the kind of combat their doctrine had been designed around. The final battles of the European War, from the crossing of the Rhine in March 1945 through Germany's surrender in May, saw American infantry equipped with M1 Garands systematically overrunning German positions. The German army, depleted of experienced soldiers and equipped with whatever weapons could be scraped together, faced American forces at the peak of their effectiveness. American infantrymen in the spring of 1945 were veterans with months or years of combat experience. They knew their M1 Garands intimately. They knew how to maintain them, how to shoot them effectively, how to employ them tactically, and they had unlimited ammunition. The combination was overwhelming. A German lieutenant, 17 years old, commanded a company of Volkssturm militia in the defense of a small town in Bavaria in April 1945. He surrendered after a brief firefight and was interviewed by American intelligence. His testimony captured the complete hopelessness of Germany's position. My men were old men and boys. Some had rifles from the First World War. Some had 1 or 2 clips of ammunition each. We were ordered to defend the town. The Americans attacked in the morning. Their rifle fire was like nothing I had ever imagined. Continuous, heavy, accurate. We fired back when we could, but we were outmatched completely. I surrendered, because staying would have meant all my men would die for nothing. Your rifles, your ammunition, your soldiers, everything was superior. We had no chance. The material and technological superiority represented by the M1 Garand extended into the Pacific theatre with equal effectiveness. While European combat often featured longer ranges and more open terrain, Pacific fighting was frequently at close range in jungle or island environments. The M1 Garand proved ideally suited to this combat as well. Japanese infantry tactics emphasized aggressive close combat. Banzai charges, nighttime infiltration, and close-range ambushes were standard Japanese methods. Against American troops with bolt-action rifles, these tactics could be effective. Against troops with M1 Garands, they became suicidal. The Battle of Tarawa in November 1943 saw Marines, many still armed with bolt-action Springfields, suffer heavy casualties taking the tiny atoll. By the time of the Peleliu invasion in September 1944, Marine units were fully equipped with M1 Garands. The difference in combat effectiveness was noticeable. Marines could deliver suppressive fire that pinned Japanese defenders in their positions while assault teams maneuvered. The sustained fire from multiple M1s allowed Marines to advance where previously they might have been stopped. Corporal Eugene Sledge, fighting with the 1st Marine Division on Peleliu and Okinawa, wrote in his memoir about the M1 Garand's effectiveness against Japanese banzai charges. When they came at us at night, screaming and charging, we just fired. Everyone fired as fast as they could pull the trigger. The M1 was perfect for that. You didn't have to think about working a bolt. You just aimed at the shapes coming at you and kept shooting until your clip pinged out. Then you reloaded and kept shooting. We threw back attacks that might have overrun positions defended by guys with bolt actions. The volume of fire we could put out saved our lives. The island-hopping campaign across the Pacific placed extraordinary demands on weapons. Salt water, coral dust, volcanic sand, and high humidity created conditions that destroyed poorly designed firearms. The M1 Garand continued to function. Its gas system required cleaning, but soldiers found they could maintain the rifle even in primitive conditions using improvised tools and materials. One aspect of the M1 Garand's effectiveness that often goes unremarked is its accuracy. While the rifle's semi-automatic action increased rate of fire, it didn't sacrifice precision. In the hands of a trained marksman, the M1 Garand was capable of excellent accuracy out to 500 yards and beyond. American soldiers trained to hit man-sized targets at 300 yards, and many could engage effectively at longer ranges. This accuracy, combined with the rapid fire, meant that American riflemen could engage multiple targets quickly at combat ranges. A German squad attempting to advance across open ground might face a single American rifleman who could fire 8 aimed shots in 10 seconds, potentially hitting 3 or 4 targets before they reached cover. The same engagement with a bolt-action rifle might see the American fire 3 shots, hitting 1 target. The cumulative effect across thousands of engagements was devastating. German casualties from rifle fire were proportionally higher when fighting Americans than when fighting other Allied forces. British and Soviet troops, armed primarily with bolt-action rifles until late in the war, inflicted fewer casualties per soldier in infantry combat. The M1 Garand gave American infantry a mathematical advantage that showed up in casualty statistics. Naturally, the M1 Garand was not perfect. The rifle had limitations that soldiers learned to work around. The 8-round on-block clip, while innovative, could not be topped off. If a soldier had fired 4 rounds and wanted to reload, he had to eject the partially empty clip, wasting 4 rounds, or continue with only 4 rounds available. Most soldiers learned to count their shots and reload during lulls in combat. The clip ejection system occasionally caused clips to be flung into a soldier's face, particularly if the rifle was tilted at certain angles when the last round fired. This was annoying but not dangerous. Soldiers learned the proper grip and stance to avoid the problem. The rifle's weight, nearly 10 pounds loaded, was a burden on long marches. Soldiers complained, as soldiers always do, about the weight of their equipment. But in combat, that weight helped manage recoil, keeping the rifle steady for rapid follow-up shots. The M1 Garand also required maintenance. The gas system needed to be cleaned regularly to prevent carbon buildup from affecting function. But American soldiers were well trained in field maintenance, and cleaning the rifle was no more difficult than maintaining a bolt-action weapon. These minor limitations were vastly outweighed by the rifle's advantages. Every weapon involves compromises. The M1 Garand's designers had made the right compromises, creating a rifle optimized for actual combat conditions rather than theoretical perfection. The comparison between the M1 Garand and its primary adversary, the German Karabiner 90K, reveals the fundamental difference in design philosophy. The Kar-98K was an excellent bolt-action rifle, accurate, reliable, and well-made. In the hands of a skilled marksman, it was deadly at long range. German soldiers were trained to engage targets at ranges of 400 meters and beyond. But this emphasis on long-range precision reflected a military doctrine that didn't match battlefield reality. Most infantry combat in World War II occurred at ranges under 200 meters. At these ranges, volume of fire mattered more than extreme accuracy. A soldier who could hit a man-sized target 80% of the time at 100 meters, firing 8 rounds, was more effective than a soldier who could hit 95% of the time, firing 3 rounds in the same period. The Kar-98K required the soldier to work the bolt between shots, a process that took approximately 1 second for a trained soldier. This meant breaking the shooting position, taking the rifle off target, cycling the action, reacquiring the target, and firing again. A skilled German rifleman might fire 15 aimed shots per minute. An equally skilled American with an M1 Garand could fire 40 to 50 aimed shots per minute, more than 3 times as many. This differential wasn't theoretical. It showed up in combat again and again. Squad-level firefights that German doctrine expected to win through superior marksmanship and tactical skill were lost, because American squads delivered 3 times as many bullets downrange. German attempts to counter the M1 Garand's advantages focused on alternative weapons rather than matching the rifle itself. The MP-40 submachine gun, issued to squad leaders and assault troops, provided high rates of fire but only at short range. The Sturmgewehr 44, the world's first true assault rifle, combined automatic fire with an intermediate cartridge. It was a revolutionary weapon, but only about 425,000 were produced, nowhere near enough to equip the millions of German soldiers in the field. The Gewehr 43, Germany's semi-automatic rifle, was the closest analogue to the M1 Garand. Introduced in 1943, it fired the same 7.92 50mm Mauser cartridge as the Kar-98K, but in semi-automatic mode. However, the G43 suffered from reliability issues and was never produced in sufficient numbers. Approximately 400,000 G43s were manufactured, compared to 5.4 million M1 Garands. Most German soldiers never saw a G43, much less carried one. This production differential illustrated the fundamental advantage America possessed. The United States could design, test, and mass-produce complex weapons while simultaneously fighting a global war. Germany, despite its engineering expertise, couldn't match American industrial output. By 1944, German factories were being bombed regularly, raw materials were scarce, and skilled workers were being drafted into military service. The ability to produce advanced weapons in the quantities needed simply didn't exist. The M1 Garand also benefited from American logistics and supply systems that kept rifles functioning in the field. Spare parts were available at every supply depot. Armourers at battalion and regimental level could repair damaged rifles quickly. Rifles that were beyond field repair could be replaced easily. American soldiers knew that if their rifle was damaged, they'd get another one. German soldiers couldn't rely on such support. Spare parts were scarce. Armourers were overworked and undersupplied. A damaged rifle might take weeks to repair or replace. This meant German soldiers often kept rifles in service that should have been replaced, leading to malfunctions at critical moments. The psychological dimensions of firepower superiority shouldn't be underestimated. American soldiers carrying M1 Garands went into combat confident in their weapons. This confidence translated into aggressive tactics and willingness to engage the enemy. German soldiers, increasingly aware they were outgunned, became hesitant. The knowledge that American infantry could deliver overwhelming fire affected German decision-making at every level. Junior German officers had to consider whether to order attacks against American positions knowing their men would face vastly superior rifle fire. Senior commanders had to plan operations around the assumption that in infantry combat, German forces would be at a significant disadvantage unless they achieved overwhelming numerical superiority or surprise. This defensive mindset represented a complete reversal from early in the war, when German infantry had been confident they could outfight any opponent through superior tactics and training. By 1944, that confidence was gone, eroded by encounters with American infantry, whose M1 Garands allowed them to fight effectively even without tactical sophistication. The liberation of concentration camps in 1945 brought a different dimension to the M1 Garand's legacy. American soldiers, confronting the horrors of Nazi genocide, carried weapons that represented not just military superiority, but moral authority. The rifle that had defeated German military forces became a symbol of liberation for survivors. Photos of American troops at Dachau, Buchenwald and other camps show soldiers with M1 Garands, the weapons that had helped bring Nazi Germany to its knees. For the soldiers themselves, the M1 Garand remained a practical tool that had kept them alive. Years later, veterans' memoirs consistently praised the rifle. Few weapons in military history have been so universally beloved by the soldiers who carried them. The M1 combined reliability, effectiveness, and what soldiers called shootability, the quality of being easy to fire accurately under stress. The rifle service didn't end with World War II. In Korea, from 1950 to 1953, the M1 Garand again proved its worth against communist forces. Chinese and North Korean troops, armed primarily with bolt-action rifles and some Soviet semi-automatic weapons, found American rifle fire to be devastating. The bitter cold of Korean winters tested the M1's reliability, and it passed. The rifle functioned in temperatures that froze other weapons solid. One engagement during the Korean War particularly demonstrated the M1 Garand's continuing effectiveness. At the Chosin Reservoir in November and December 1950, surrounded Marines fought their way through Chinese forces in brutal conditions. Temperatures dropped to 30 degrees below zero. The Marines, armed with M1 Garands, maintained their weapons obsessively, keeping them functioning despite conditions that would have rendered lesser rifles useless. Staff Sergeant Archie Van Winkle, earning the Medal of Honor during the Chosin breakout, used his M1 Garand to hold off attacking Chinese soldiers while wounded Marines were evacuated. His citation noted that he killed or wounded numerous enemy soldiers with accurate rifle fire despite being wounded himself. The M1's reliability in extreme cold was credited with saving countless lives during the Chosin campaign. By the late 1950s, military doctrine was shifting towards selective fire rifles capable of both semi-automatic and fully automatic fire. The M14, adopted in 1957, replaced the M1 Garand as the standard American military rifle. The M14 was essentially an updated Garand, with a detachable 20-round magazine and select fire capability. It retained the M1's basic gas operating system and many design elements, testimony to how sound John Garand's original design had been. Even after being replaced, M1 Garands remained in service for years. National Guard units carried them into the 1960s. The rifle was used for ceremonial purposes and by drill teams. The distinctive profile of the M1 Garand, with its wooden stock and 8-round clip, became an iconic image of American military power. The rifle's influence extended beyond American service. During and after World War II, M1 Garands were supplied to Allied nations under military assistance programs. French, Italian, Greek, Turkish, and numerous other armed forces used the M1. Some countries continued using the rifle into the 1980s. The M1's robust construction meant that rifles built in the 1940s were still functional decades later. In shooting competitions today, the M1 Garand remains popular. The national matches at Camp Perry, Ohio include M1 Garand categories, where competitors use these vintage rifles to demonstrate marksmanship. Shooters consistently achieve excellent accuracy, proving that the rifle's design remains sound 80 years after its introduction. The Civilian Marksmanship Program, operating under federal charter, has sold hundreds of thousands of surplus M1 Garands to qualified American citizens. These rifles, many of them original World War II or Korean War veterans, are treasured by owners who appreciate their historical significance and shooting qualities. Collecting M1 Garands has become a serious hobby, with enthusiasts seeking rifles from specific manufacturers or time periods. The restoration and preservation of M1 Garands ensures that future generations will be able to see and handle the rifle that armed American forces during their greatest challenges. Museums worldwide display M1 Garands, often as centerpieces of World War II exhibits. The rifle's cultural significance transcends its role as a military weapon. In the end, the M1 Garand story is about the intersection of industrial capacity, tactical necessity, and human ingenuity. John Garand's design provided American soldiers with a weapon that multiplied their effectiveness. American industry manufactured that weapon in quantities that ensured every soldier could be equipped. American logistics delivered the rifle and its ammunition wherever American forces fought, and American soldiers used the rifle to achieve battlefield superiority against enemies who had no effective answer. The German officers who dismissed the M1 Garand as wasteful in 1942 weren't stupid or incompetent. They were applying a worldview shaped by European military traditions, where resources were limited and had to be carefully managed. What they failed to grasp was that American industrial capacity had changed the fundamental equation. When you could produce 11 billion rounds of ammunition, firing 40 rounds per minute wasn't wasteful. It was tactically optimal. By the time German officers recognized their error, they were fighting a defensive war against an enemy whose infantry possessed overwhelming firepower advantages. The request for equivalent weapons came too late. German industry, even if it had possessed the capacity, couldn't retool quickly enough to make a difference. The war would be decided by the weapons and resources already in the field, and in that contest the M1 Garand gave American infantry an insurmountable edge. The rifle that German officers thought was wastefully extravagant turned out to be exactly what modern warfare demanded. Reliable, powerful, quick-firing and manufacturable in quantities limited only by industrial capacity. The M1 Garand didn't just arm American soldiers, it gave them confidence, capability, and a weapon that functioned flawlessly under the worst conditions imaginable. For the men who carried it through the campaigns of World War II and Korea, the M1 Garand was more than a rifle. It was the tool that brought them home alive. And for the German soldiers who faced it, the M1 Garand became the sound of defeat, the rattle of semi-automatic fire that meant American infantry were advancing, and retreat was the only option for survival.